The deafening crack of a gunshot pierced the morning stillness as Madeline Porter ducked behind the half-empty water trough, her heart hammering against her ribs like a wild Mustang. This was not how she had planned to start her day in Silver Creek, but then again, nothing in her life had gone according to plan since her father's death 3 months ago. "Miss Porter," Sheriff Daniels called out from behind the cover of a nearby barrel, "get yourself to safety. These outlaws ain't here for a friendly visit." Madeline gathered her skirts, ready to make a dash for the general store when another shot splintered the wooden post beside her. She gasped, pressing herself against the dusty ground as fragments of wood showered over her auburn hair. The year was 1878, and the promise of civilization that had lured settlers to this part of Wyoming territory seemed laughably distant as bullets flew through Main Street. Through the cloud of gunpowder and dust, she glimpsed a tall figure moving swiftly toward her, a revolver gripped firmly in his hand. For a terrifying moment, Madeline thought one of the bandits had spotted her, but then she recognized the distinctive silhouette of Wyatt Finley, the quiet rancher whose property bordered her struggling farm. "Stay down," he commanded in a voice as steady as iron. Without waiting for her response, he fired 2 precise shots toward the bank where the outlaws had taken cover. A pained cry confirmed his aim was true. "I can manage myself," she retorted, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her fear. A ghost of a smile crossed his sun-weathered face. "Never said you couldn't, Miss Porter." His blue eyes never left the scene before them as he reloaded his Colt. But 4 against 1 ain't favorable odds for anyone. The gunfight ended as abruptly as it had begun when Sheriff Daniels and his deputy managed to wound one of the bandits, sending the others fleeing on horseback with only a fraction of the bank's money. As the dust settled, Wyatt helped Madeline to her feet with a calloused hand that was surprisingly gentle. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his eyes scanning her for injuries. "Only my pride," she answered, brushing the dirt from her faded blue dress. "Thank you for your assistance, Mr. Finley." He tipped his hat slightly. "Just doing what any man ought to." As they parted ways, Madeline couldn't help but notice how the townswomen gathered at the millinery shop watched her with pitying glances, their whispers barely concealed behind gloved hands. She'd grown accustomed to being the subject of gossip since arriving in Silver Creek a year ago with her ailing father, hoping the mountain air would improve his consumption. It hadn't. Now, at 23, she was alone, unmarried and struggling to maintain the small farm her father had purchased with the last of their savings. The whispers followed her everywhere. "Poor thing," they'd say. "No family, no prospects. She'll die a spinster out on that barren plot." Madeline lifted her chin and strode purposefully toward the general store. Let them talk. She had survived worse than wagging tongues. The store's bell jingled as she entered, and Mr. Harrison greeted her with his usual mix of friendliness and concern. "Miss Porter, quite a commotion out there." "You're not hurt, are you?" "I'm perfectly fine, thank you." She placed her small list on the counter. "Just the essentials today, if you please." While Mr. Harrison gathered her supplies, the door opened again, and Mrs. Whittaker swept in with her daughter Louisa in tow. Both women were dressed in the latest Eastern fashions, their presence a reminder of everything Madeline lacked. "Madeline, dear," Mrs. Whittaker cooed with false sympathy, "we were just discussing you at our sewing circle yesterday. Such a brave soul, managing that farm all alone. Have you considered selling? I'm sure my husband could offer you a fair price." "The farm isn't for sale," Madeline replied evenly, "but thank you for your concern." Mrs. Whittaker's smile tightened. "Well, do think about it. A young woman alone. It's simply not proper. And after today's violence," she shook her head dramatically. This territory is no place for an unprotected female. I'm quite capable of protecting myself, Madeline insisted, though the memory of cowering behind the water trough undermined her confidence. Of course you are, Mrs. Whitaker said dismissively. But capability and propriety are different matters entirely. Why, just yesterday, Reverend Thomas was saying how he prays you'll find a suitable arrangement before winter comes. Her voice dropped to a theatrical whisper. Everyone knows you'll be alone forever if something doesn't change, dear. Madeline's cheeks burned as she gathered her purchases. Good day, Mrs. Whitaker. Louisa. She nodded stiffly and left the store, the weight of the gossip heavier than her packages. Outside, the town had returned to its usual routine, as if the morning's violence had been nothing more than a brief thunderstorm. Madeline headed toward her wagon, parked near the blacksmith's, when a commotion at the livery stable caught her attention. A magnificent black stallion was rearing and snorting, its wild eyes rolling as two stable boys attempted to control it. Behind them stood Wyatt Finley, his expression unreadable as he watched the scene. That beast will be the death of someone, the blacksmith called out. Too wild for its own good. Wyatt shook his head. He just needs patience and a firm hand. Without thinking, Madeline approached, drawn to the beautiful animal despite its fearsome display. Is he yours, Mr. Finley? Wyatt turned, surprise briefly lighting his features. Yes, madam. Caught him in the high country last spring. Been working with him since, though some folks think I'm wasting my time. The stallion calmed somewhat as Madeline drew near, its nostrils flaring as it caught her scent. She reached out slowly, letting the animal become accustomed to her presence before gently touching its velvety nose. You have a way with troubled creatures, Wyatt observed quietly. Perhaps I recognize a kindred spirit, she replied with a small smile. Their eyes met briefly, and something unspoken passed between them before the moment was shattered by the appearance of Timothy Walsh, the bank manager, his face ruddy with anger. Finley, a word if you please. Wyatt's expression closed off immediately. Mr. Walsh. Those were Blackwell's men this morning, Walsh hissed, low enough that only Wyatt and Madeline could hear. Third bank they've hit this month. Word is they're camped somewhere near your property. I don't keep track of outlaws' whereabouts, Wyatt replied coolly. Walsh's eyes narrowed. See that you don't. A man with your history should be careful about the company he keeps. As Walsh stalked away, Madeline glanced curiously at Wyatt, whose jaw had tightened noticeably. What did he mean by that? Nothing worth repeating, Wyatt said, his voice flat. He turned his attention back to the stallion, effectively ending the conversation. Madeline hesitated, then gathered her courage. Mr. Finley, I wanted to thank you properly for your help this morning. Perhaps you could join me for supper at my farm tomorrow. It's the least I can do. She expected a polite refusal. After all, respectable men didn't call on women living alone unless courting was their intention, but to her surprise, Wyatt nodded. I'd be honored, Miss Porter. Around sundown. Sundown would be perfect. As she drove her wagon home, Madeline pondered the unexpected invitation she had extended. It wasn't proper, and it would certainly give the gossips fresh material, but something about Wyatt Finley intrigued her. Perhaps it was the quiet strength he emanated, or the shadows that sometimes darkened his blue eyes, suggesting depths beyond the taciturn rancher the town knew. Her farm came into view as she crested the final hill, 20 acres of land. A small cabin, a barn that leaned slightly to the left, and a vegetable garden that had produced just enough to keep her fed through summer. It wasn't much, but it was hers, the only thing standing between her and destitution. As she unhitched her horse, a movement at the edge of her property caught her eye. A man on horseback was watching from a distance, his face obscured by the setting sun. For a moment, fear gripped her, wondering if one of the bank robbers had followed her. But then the figure turned and rode away, disappearing into the gathering dusk. That night, as a late summer storm raged outside, Madeline sat by her fireplace, mending a torn shirt and trying not to dwell on Mrs. Whittaker's cruel words. They whispered that she'd be alone forever. The thought echoed in her mind, accompanied by the relentless patter of rain against her windows. She was strong, independent, and determined, qualities that had served her well in the face of adversity. But in the quiet hours, when the weight of solitude pressed down like a physical thing, even Madeline couldn't deny the loneliness that threatened to consume her. Little did she know that 10 miles away, Wyatt Finley stood on his porch, staring in the direction of her farm as lightning illuminated the vast Wyoming sky. His thoughts inexplicably drawn to the auburn-haired woman with defiant green eyes who had somehow managed to penetrate the carefully constructed walls around his heart. The morning dawned clear and bright, washing away the previous night's storm like a half-remembered dream. Madeline rose with the sun, her routine unchanged despite the anticipation that fluttered in her stomach at the thought of her dinner guest. She fed the chickens, collected eggs, and tended her garden with practiced efficiency, though her mind kept wandering to Wyatt Finley and the mystery that surrounded him. By midday, she had decided to ride into town for a few extra supplies: coffee, sugar, perhaps a bit of cinnamon if she could afford it. She wanted the meal to be special, though she chided herself for caring so much about impressing a man she barely knew. Silver Creek was busy, the streets muddy from the rain but full of activity. Madeline tied her horse outside the general store and was about to enter when a familiar voice called her name. "Miss Porter, a moment, please." Turning, she found herself face to face with Reverend Thomas, his perpetual expression of concern deepened by the furrows in his brow. "Good afternoon, Reverend," she greeted politely. "I'm glad to have caught you. I've been meaning to speak with you since the unfortunate incident yesterday." He guided her to a quieter spot near the church. "Mrs. Whittaker mentioned you seemed resistant to considering alternative arrangements for your situation." Madeline stiffened. "My situation is my own affair, Reverend. Of course, of course." He patted her hand in a manner she found patronizing. "But the Lord instructs us to care for widows and orphans, and while you are neither in the strictest sense, you are a young woman alone in a harsh land. There are several respectable families in our congregation who would welcome you as a governess or companion." "I have a home," Madeline stated firmly, "and I'm managing quite well." The Reverend sighed. "Pride is a sin, Miss Porter. There is no shame in accepting help when it is offered in Christian charity." "Is it truly charity they're offering, or cheap labor?" she countered, immediately regretting her sharp tone. "Forgive me, Reverend. I appreciate your concern, but I am determined to honor my father's memory by maintaining our farm." "Your determination is admirable if misplaced." He studied her face, his expression softening slightly. "Very well, but should you reconsider, my door is always open, as is God's." As she watched him walk away, Madeline couldn't shake the feeling that the town was closing in around her, determined to force her into a mold she had no desire to fill. The general store suddenly seemed suffocating, so she redirected her steps to the small bookshop tucked between the saloon and the blacksmith. The bell above the door tinkled softly as she entered, and the familiar smell of paper and leather enveloped her like an old friend. Mr. Peterson, the elderly proprietor, peered at her over his spectacles. "Miss Porter, what a pleasant surprise. I've just received a shipment from back east. Perhaps something might interest you." "I'm afraid I can't afford new books today, Mr. Peterson. I was just seeking a moment's peace." He smiled knowingly. The best kind of customers are those who come for the atmosphere. Browse as long as you like. Grateful, Madeline wandered among the shelves, trailing her fingers along the spines of books that represented worlds she could only visit through their pages. She paused at a volume of poetry, opening it to a random page where lines about solitude and resilience seemed to speak directly to her soul. Thoreau has that effect on people. A deep voice commented from behind her. Startled, she turned to find Wyatt Finley standing a respectful distance away, a book of his own in hand. "Mr. Finley, I didn't expect to see you here." A hint of amusement touched his eyes. "Because cowboys aren't supposed to read." "No, she flustered, then caught the slight upward curl of his lips. "You're teasing me, guilty as charged." He nodded toward the book in her hands. Thoreau understood the value of solitude, but even he came down from Walden Pond eventually. "Are you suggesting I'm hiding from the world, Mr. Finley?" "No more than I am." There was something in his tone that hinted at shared experience, a recognition of kindred spirits that made her heart beat just a little faster. Before she could respond, the shop door burst open and Sheriff Daniels entered, his expression grim. "Finley, there you are, need a word." His eyes flicked to Madeline. "Madam." Wyatt's posture changed subtly, tension evident in the set of his shoulders. "What can I do for you, Sheriff?" One of the men from yesterday's robbery was captured near Rattlesnake Creek. Before he died from his wounds, he claimed to have associates hiding out near the old mining camp on your property. Madeline watched as Wyatt's face became unreadable. "My property covers a lot of ground, Sheriff." "The mining camp's been abandoned for years." "Be that as it may, I'm organizing a search party. As a law-abiding citizen, I expect your cooperation." Something flashed in Wyatt's eyes, anger perhaps, or something deeper. "You'll have it." The sheriff nodded curtly. "We ride at dawn." With a tip of his hat to Madeline, he departed, leaving a heavy silence in his wake. Wyatt turned to her, his expression softening slightly. "I apologize, Miss Porter, but it seems I may need to postpone our dinner. Law-abiding citizen duties call." Despite her disappointment, Madeline managed a smile. "Of course, perhaps another time. Count on it." He returned his book to the shelf and moved toward the door, then paused. "Miss Porter, Madeline, be careful riding home. Stay on the main roads." With that cryptic warning, he was gone, leaving her to wonder about the complexities of the man who had so unexpectedly entered her life. The ride home was uneventful, though Madeline found herself scanning the horizon with newfound wariness. The dinner she had planned now seemed silly, a desperate attempt at connection in a world that seemed determined to remind her of her isolation. As she approached her farm, however, she noticed something amiss. Smoke was rising from her chimney, though she had banked the fire before leaving that morning. Heart racing, she urged her horse forward, preparing herself for the worst. What she found instead was bewildering. Her front door was open, and the delicious aroma of cooking food wafted from inside. Cautiously, she dismounted and approached, picking up a pitchfork from where it leaned against the porch as an improvised weapon. "Hello," she called, her voice steadier than she felt. A familiar figure appeared in the doorway, wiping flour-covered hands on an apron. "About time you got home. The biscuits are almost done." "Martha." Madeline lowered the pitchfork, staring in disbelief at her childhood friend from back east. "What on earth are you doing here?" Martha Davis grinned, her round face as cheerful as Madeline remembered. "Surprising you, obviously." "Did you think I'd let you become a frontier woman without seeing it for myself?" She embraced Madeline tightly. "Your last letter sounded so lonely I decided to visit. I hope that's all right." Tears sprang to Madeline's eyes as she returned the hug. "More than all right, but how did you get here? How did you find my farm?" "The stagecoach. 2 trains and another stagecoach," Martha laughed. "As for finding you, a helpful cowboy pointed me in the right direction when I reached town. Tall fellow, serious eyes, riding a black horse that looked like it could outrun the devil himself." "Wyatt Finley," Madeline murmured, warmth spreading through her chest at the realization he must have directed Martha here after their meeting in town. "That's the one. Now come inside and tell me everything while we eat. I want to hear all about this wild Wyoming life of yours." For the first time in months, Madeline's small cabin was filled with laughter and conversation. Martha, 3 years her junior at 20, had always been the sister she never had. They had grown up together in Pennsylvania, their mother's best friends until illness took both women within a year of each other. Over a simple but delicious meal, Madeline shared the challenges of maintaining the farm alone, carefully editing the most desperate moments. Martha, in turn, updated her on mutual acquaintances back home and her own recently broken engagement. "He was dreadfully dull," Martha confided. "Mother was devastated when I called it off, but I couldn't imagine spending my life with a man whose most passionate opinion was about the proper way to polish silver." "So you escaped to the wilds of Wyoming," Madeline teased. "I came to visit my dearest friend," Martha corrected. "Though I won't deny the appeal of adventure, and speaking of adventure," her eyes twinkled mischievously, "tell me about this Wyatt Finley. He seemed quite concerned about your welfare." Madeline felt her cheeks warm. "He's just a neighbor. Our properties adjoin to the north." "A neighborly cowboy with eyes like a summer storm. How terribly dull," Martha teased. "And I suppose he rescued you from bank robbers out of mere politeness as well. News travels fast," Madeline muttered. "Small towns are the same everywhere," Martha shrugged. "So, is there something between you two?" "Absolutely not," Madeline insisted, though her traitorous heart skipped at the question. "He was supposed to come for dinner tomorrow, but there's some trouble with outlaws hiding on his property. The sheriff's organizing a search party." Martha's eyes widened. "Outlaws? How exciting, though I suppose that's not the right response." Despite herself, Madeline laughed. "It's good to have you here, Martha. I'd forgotten what it's like to have someone to talk to." "Well, get used to it. I'm staying at least until the first snow." Martha squeezed her hand. "I won't have my best friend facing the wilderness alone." That night, as Martha slept soundly in the small spare room that had once been her father's, Madeline lay awake, her thoughts drifting between gratitude for her friend's arrival and concern for Wyatt Finley, riding out at dawn to hunt dangerous men. The connection between them was tenuous, barely more than shared glances and brief conversations, yet she couldn't deny the pull she felt toward him, like a compass needle finding north. Outside, an owl called into the darkness, its lonely cry echoing the whispers that had followed her through Silver Creek. She'd be alone forever. But for the first time since her father's death, Madeline allowed herself to wonder if perhaps those whispers might be wrong. Dawn broke with a symphony of birdsong and the distant lowing of cattle. Madeline and Martha shared a light breakfast before tackling the day's chores together. Martha, despite her city upbringing, threw herself into farm work with enthusiasm if not skill, her attempts at milking the cow providing much-needed laughter. "The poor beast probably thinks I'm trying to torture her," Martha sighed after another failed attempt. "She'll get used to you," Madeline assured her. "And you'll improve. It just takes practice." They were hanging laundry on the line when the sound of approaching hoofbeats drew their attention. 3 riders approached from the direction of town, dust rising behind them like a small thundercloud. Madeline recognized Sheriff Daniels in the lead, his distinctive handlebar mustache visible even at a distance. Beside him rode his deputy, and to her surprise, Wyatt Finley brought up the rear, his expression grim. "Ladies," the sheriff greeted as they reined in their horses. "Sorry to intrude, Miss Porter. We're checking all the outlying properties. Had any strangers pass through recently?" "None that I've seen," Madeline replied, noting how Wyatt's eyes scanned the farm with methodical precision, as if searching for something specific. "Is there trouble?" "Just being thorough," the sheriff hedged. "The man we captured yesterday had a map with several locations marked. Your farm was one of them." A chill ran down Madeline's spine despite the warm morning sun. "What does that mean?" Deputy Collins snorted. "Means those outlaws might have been planning to use your place as a hideout. Probably figured a woman alone wouldn't put up much resistance." Wyatt's sharp glance silenced the deputy. "It means you should be cautious," he said, his voice low. "Keep your doors locked at night." "I'll stay with Madeline," Martha declared firmly. "Safety in numbers." Sheriff Daniels tipped his hat. "Wise precaution, miss. We'll continue our patrol, but if you see anything suspicious, fire 3 shots in the air. Someone will hear and come running." He turned to his companions. "Let's move on." As they prepared to ride out, Wyatt lingered a moment longer. "I meant to bring this by yesterday," he said, reaching into his saddlebag. He withdrew a book, the same volume of Thoreau she had been examining in the bookshop. "Thought you might enjoy it." Madeline accepted the book, their fingers brushing briefly. "Thank you, it's very kind." "Just being neighborly," he replied, though something in his eyes suggested otherwise. "Take care, Miss Porter, Miss Davis." With a nod, he rejoined the others, and soon the 3 riders were nothing but diminishing specks on the horizon. Martha let out a low whistle once they were out of earshot. "Just being neighborly, my foot. That man is sweet on you, Madeline Porter." "Don't be ridiculous," Madeline protested, though she clutched the book to her chest. "He's just decent. Decent men don't ride miles out of their way to deliver books to women they're not interested in." Martha grinned. "And the way he looked at you, like you're water in the desert." "You have an overactive imagination," Madeline chided, but she couldn't help the small smile that tugged at her lips as they returned to their chores. That evening, after a simple supper, the 2 women sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in hues of gold and crimson. Martha mended a tear in her traveling dress, while Madeline read aloud from the Thoreau book, its pages already a comfort in her hands. "I learned this, at least, by my experiment," she read, "that if one advances confidently in the direction of his dreams and endeavors to live the life which he has imagined, he will meet with a success unexpected in common hours." "Beautiful," Martha sighed. "Though I'm not sure Thoreau had to deal with outlaws and busybody townsfolk while pursuing his dreams." Madeline laughed. "Probably not," but she paused, her attention caught by movement at the edge of her property. "Martha, do you see that, by the large oak tree?" Martha squinted into the gathering dusk. "I don't. Wait, yes. Is that a person?" Before Madeline could respond, the figure disappeared into the tree line. Heart pounding, she stood, reaching for the rifle she kept beside the door. "Should we fire those 3 shots?" Martha whispered, her earlier bravado replaced by genuine concern. Madeline hesitated. "Not yet. It could have been a deer or shadows playing tricks." But she double-checked that the rifle was loaded all the same. "Let's go inside, though. I'd rather be cautious." They secured the doors and windows, the peaceful evening suddenly fraught with unseen threats. Madeline positioned the rifle within easy reach as they tried to resume their normal activities, but every creak of the cabin's timbers, every rustle of wind through the trees, set their nerves on edge. "Perhaps we should take turns keeping watch," Martha suggested as bedtime approached. "You're not used to night watches," Madeline pointed out. "I'll take first shift and wake you in a few hours." Despite Martha's protests, the arrangement stood, and soon her friend was asleep in the small bedroom. Madeline sat in the rocking chair by the window, rifle across her lap, watching the moonlit landscape for any sign of intrusion. The hours crept by with agonizing slowness. Twice she thought she saw movement near the barn, but nothing materialized. Her eyelids grew heavy despite her determination to stay alert, and she found herself drifting in and out of a light doze. A distinctive crack like a twig snapping underfoot jolted her fully awake. The sound had come from the front porch. Heart hammering, Madeline gripped the rifle and moved silently to the door, straining to hear any further noise. For several long moments, nothing. Then, a soft scraping sound as if someone was testing the door handle. Madeline raised the rifle, aiming at the center of the door, her finger hovering near the trigger. "I know you're in there, Miss Porter," a voice called softly, not threatening but familiar. "It's Wyatt Finley. Don't shoot." Relief flooded through her, though caution kept her rifle raised. "Prove it's you. You were reading Thoreau on your porch earlier. If one advances confidently in the direction of his dreams." Madeline lowered the rifle and unbolted the door, opening it to find Wyatt standing on her porch, his horse tethered to the railing. "What are you doing here in the middle of the night?" she whispered, acutely aware of her disheveled appearance and the impropriety of the situation. "Keeping an eye on things," he answered, his voice equally low. "I saw someone watching your house earlier while we were on patrol. Didn't want to alarm you then, but I couldn't shake the feeling something wasn't right. I saw someone too just after sunset." She stepped back, allowing him to enter. "Martha's asleep. We were taking turns keeping watch." Wyatt nodded approvingly. "Smart, but you both need rest." "I'll stay until morning." "That's not necessary, it is," he cut her off gently. "I wouldn't forgive myself if something happened when I could have prevented it." There was something in his tone, a hint of old pain, perhaps, that silenced her objections. "At least sit down. Can I offer you coffee?" "Coffee would be welcome." He removed his hat but kept his gun belt on, settling into a chair with a clear view of both the front door and the window facing the barn. Madeline stoked the fire and put the coffee pot on, hyper-aware of the man sitting quietly in her home, his presence simultaneously comforting and unsettling. When she returned with 2 steaming cups, she found him examining the few photographs she had displayed on the mantel. "My parents on their wedding day," she explained, handing him a cup. "And that's me with my father just before we left Pennsylvania." Wyatt studied the image of a younger Madeline, her face unmarked by the hardships that would follow. "You look happy." "We were then. Father believed the West would offer us a fresh start after Mother died." She sat across from him, cradling her own cup. He didn't expect the harshness of the land, or that his health would fail so quickly. "The West breaks many who come seeking paradise," Wyatt observed. "It respects only those who respect it back, its dangers, its beauty, its unforgiving nature." "You sound like you learned that lesson personally." A shadow crossed his face. "Most of us out here have, some at greater cost than others." The cryptic response hung between them, an invitation to inquire further that Madeline found herself accepting. "The bank manager, Mr. Walsh, he mentioned something about your history. What did he mean?" Wyatt's eyes met hers, measuring, assessing. Then, surprisingly, he answered. "I rode with a different kind of outfit before settling here. Not outlaws exactly, but men who lived by their own code, not always aligned with the law." He took a sip of coffee. "I was young, angry, looking for something I couldn't name, found trouble instead." "What changed?" "Saw too many good men die for poor reasons." His gaze drifted to the window, though Madeline suspected he was seeing something far beyond her farm. "Decided I wanted more from life than an unmarked grave in some forgotten canyon." The honesty of his answer touched her. "Thank you for telling me." Seems only fair you know who's sitting in your home in the middle of the night." A hint of his rare smile appeared. "Besides, you've got enough troubles without adding a man with shadows in his past." "Perhaps I find shadows more interesting than the blinding certainty some people possess about how others should live," she returned, surprising herself with her boldness. Their eyes met, and for a breath-stopping moment, Madeline felt something electric pass between them, a recognition that transcended their brief acquaintance. The moment broke when a floorboard creaked, announcing Martha's presence in the doorway, wrapped in a shawl and eyeing them with curious surprise. "I thought I heard voices," she said, taking in the scene. "Mr. Finley, this is becoming quite the habit, appearing when my friend needs assistance." If Wyatt was embarrassed at being caught in what could be considered a compromising situation, he didn't show it. "Miss Davis, I apologize for disturbing your sleep." "Not at all. I'm sure Madeline appreciates the company during her watch." Martha's innocent tone couldn't quite mask her mischievous glance at Madeline. Though perhaps next time, daylight hours would be more conventional. "Martha," Madeline admonished, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. "Mr. Finley spotted someone watching the house," she explained quickly. "He came to make sure we were safe." "How gallant." Martha settled onto the sofa, clearly intending to join the conversation rather than return to bed. "And have you seen any more mysterious lurkers tonight?" "Not yet," Wyatt answered, "but that doesn't mean they've given up." "The Blackwell gang isn't known for abandoning targets easily." "The Blackwell gang," Martha echoed. "They sound positively theatrical." Despite the seriousness of the situation, Wyatt's lips twitched. "Don't let the name fool you. They've killed 6 men that I know of, and that's just in the last year." The levity vanished from Martha's expression. "Oh, that's considerably less theatrical. Which is why I'll be staying until morning," Wyatt continued. "With your permission, of course," he added, glancing at Madeline. "Of course," she agreed, both relieved and disconcerted by the prospect of his continued presence. "We're grateful for your protection." The three settled into an unexpected but not uncomfortable vigil, with Martha eventually drifting off again on the sofa while Madeline and Wyatt maintained their watch by the window. They spoke little, but the silence between them was companionable, filled with unspoken understanding. As the first hint of dawn lightened the eastern sky, Wyatt stood and stretched, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the cabin floor. "No sign of trouble," he observed. "But I'd feel better if you both came into town today. Stay at the hotel until we've sorted this situation." "I can't abandon my farm," Madeline protested. "The animals need care, and the animals and garden won't matter much if you're not alive to tend them," he countered, his tone gentle but firm. Martha, who had awakened with the movement, nodded in agreement. "He's right, Madeline. We can come back once it's safe." Seeing herself outnumbered, Madeline reluctantly conceded. "Very well, we'll pack a few things and follow you to town." "I'll wait outside while you get ready," Wyatt said, donning his hat. "Take only what you need. We should leave as soon as possible." The morning light revealed a landscape deceptively peaceful, golden and serene under the rising sun. Madeline moved efficiently, packing essentials while Martha prepared a quick breakfast. By the time the sun had fully crested the horizon, they were ready to depart. Madeline's horse hitched to her small wagon with Martha beside her on the seat, and Wyatt mounted on his stallion. "Keep close," he instructed as they set out. "The main road should be safe, but we'll make better time if we cut across the eastern meadow and follow the creek into town." The alternate route took them through a picturesque stretch of Wyatt's property, where stands of aspen trees shivered their golden leaves in the morning breeze, and the creek gurgled merrily over smooth stones. Under different circumstances, Madeline would have found it enchanting. They had covered perhaps half the distance to town when Wyatt suddenly reined in his horse, his posture alert. Madeline pulled the wagon to a stop, sensing his concern. "What is it?" she whispered. He gestured for silence, his eyes scanning the tree line ahead. For several tense moments, nothing moved but the leaves dancing in the breeze. Then, with a suddenness that made both women gasp, 3 riders emerged from the trees, blocking their path. "Well, well," drawled the leader, a lean man with a pockmarked face and cold eyes. "What have we here?" Finley playing escort to the ladies. How civilized. Wyatt's hand hovered near his gun, his voice deceptively casual. "Morning, Blackwell. Didn't expect to see you in these parts." Madeline's blood ran cold. This was Jerome Blackwell himself, the notorious outlaw whose gang had terrorized 3 territories. She felt Martha's hand clutch her arm in fear. "Change of plans," Blackwell replied with a predatory smile. "Your little visit to the Porter farm last night suggested we might find something valuable there. Or someone." His gaze shifted to Madeline, appraising her in a way that made her skin crawl. "The ladies have nothing to do with this," Wyatt said evenly. "Let them pass, and you and I can discuss whatever grievance you think you have." Blackwell laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. "Always the gentleman, Finley, but I think these ladies might be useful insurance for our safe passage out of the territory. The blonde one especially looks like she'd fetch a fine price south of the border." Martha made a small, frightened sound, and Madeline instinctively pushed her friend behind her, though the gesture offered little real protection. "That's not going to happen," Wyatt stated, his tone shifting from casual to dangerous. "Last chance, Jerome. Ride away now." For a tense moment, no one moved. Then, with practiced speed, Blackwell drew his pistol only to find Wyatt's already aimed at his chest. "You always were fast," Blackwell acknowledged, not lowering his weapon. "But there's 3 of us and 1 of you. Those odds favor me." "Those odds favor a lot of blood," Wyatt corrected. "Including yours." The standoff stretched, the morning air thick with tension. Madeline's heart hammered in her chest as she calculated the distance to Wyatt's rifle, strapped to his saddle. Could she reach it in time if shooting started? Would it make any difference? The decision was made for her when the sound of approaching riders drew everyone's attention. From the direction of town, a group of mounted men appeared, led by Sheriff Daniels. Among them, Madeline recognized Mr. Harrison from the general store and several other townsmen, all armed, Blackwell's face contorted with fury. "This isn't over, Finley," he spat, backing his horse away. "Not by a long shot." "It is for today," Wyatt replied steadily, his gun still trained on the outlaw. With a final venomous glare, Blackwell and his men wheeled their horses and galloped away, disappearing into the trees from which they had emerged. The sheriff's party reached them moments later, faces grim. "Everyone all right?" Sheriff Daniels asked, his eyes moving from Wyatt to the women. "Shaken but unharmed," Wyatt confirmed. "Blackwell's bold, coming this close to town in daylight." "Desperate men take desperate chances," the sheriff observed. "We got word this morning that the territorial marshal's office has put a substantial bounty on his head. He's probably looking for a way out of the territory." "And he thought we might be useful for that purpose," Madeline supplied, her voice steadier than she felt. "Well, he thought wrong," Sheriff Daniels declared. "We'll escort you ladies to town. You'll be safe there while we organize a proper manhunt for these vermin." As they continued toward Silver Creek with their expanded escort, Madeline found herself riding closer to Wyatt, drawn to his calm strength in the face of danger. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You put yourself at risk for us." His eyes, when they met hers, held unexpected warmth. "Some things are worth the risk, Miss Porter." The words, simple as they were, settled in her heart like a promise. Silver Creek was buzzing with activity when they arrived, news of the encounter with Blackwell having somehow preceded them. The sheriff led them directly to the hotel, where Mrs. Whitaker, surprisingly, was waiting to greet them with uncharacteristic concern. "My dear Miss Porter, Miss Davis, what a terrible ordeal you've endured. You must come stay with us. We have plenty of room, and you'll be much more comfortable than at this establishment." Martha looked to Madeline with raised eyebrows, clearly recognizing the social maneuvering at play. Before Madeline could formulate a polite refusal, Wyatt spoke up. "Thank you for your generosity, Mrs. Whitaker, but the hotel has the advantage of being directly across from the sheriff's office. For safety reasons, this seems the better option." Mrs. Whitaker's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course, Mr. Finley. Safety must be the priority, though I wasn't aware you had appointed yourself these ladies' guardian." "Not their guardian," Wyatt corrected mildly. "Just a concerned neighbor." "Indeed." Mrs. Whitaker's gaze shifted between them speculatively. "Well, I shall inform Reverend Thomas that you are both safe. He's been most distressed since hearing of the danger." With a rustle of expensive fabric, she departed, leaving a lingering scent of lavender and disapproval. "Charming woman," Martha murmured once Mrs. Whitaker was out of earshot. "Does she always look like she's smelling something unpleasant?" Despite everything, Madeline laughed. "Only when her attempts at social dominance are thwarted." She turned to Wyatt. "Thank you for intervening. I'm not sure I could have mustered a gracious refusal." "Happy to help." He glanced toward the sheriff's office. "I should join the others. They'll be planning the search for Blackwell." "Of course." Madeline hesitated, then added, "Be careful, Mr. Finley." Something in his expression softened. "I will, and it's Wyatt. After facing down outlaws together, I think we're beyond formalities, don't you, Wyatt?" she repeated, liking the feel of his name on her lips. "And I'm Madeline." Their eyes held for a moment longer than strictly proper before he tipped his hat and strode across the street, his tall figure commanding attention even in a town accustomed to his presence. Martha waited until he was out of earshot before nudging Madeline's arm. "Well, that was positively smoldering. If he doesn't kiss you soon, I may have to intervene on principle alone." "Martha!" Madeline exclaimed, scandalized yet unable to suppress a smile. "You're incorrigible." "I prefer observant," Martha countered as they entered the hotel lobby. "And what I observe is two people circling each other like wary dancers, afraid to take the first step." Madeline couldn't deny the accuracy of her friend's assessment, but concern for Wyatt's safety overshadowed any romantic considerations. As they settled into their modest hotel room, her thoughts remained with the tall cowboy who had, in the space of a few days, become inexplicably important to her. The next 3 days passed in a blur of tension and waiting. The sheriff organized search parties that combed the surrounding countryside for any sign of Blackwell and his men, while Madeline and Martha remained in town, venturing out only for brief walks and necessary errands, always accompanied by a deputy or one of the townsmen who had volunteered as additional security. On the evening of the 3rd day, Madeline stood at the hotel window, watching as another search party returned, their tired horses plodding down the main street. Among them was Wyatt, his shoulders slumped with fatigue but his back still straight with innate dignity. Still no sign of them. Martha asked, joining her at the window. "Apparently not." Madeline sighed, her concern evident. "The men look exhausted." "Especially your cowboy," Martha observed. "He's been out longer than any of the others." "He's not my cowboy," Madeline protested automatically, though the words lacked conviction. "Keep telling yourself that." Martha squeezed her shoulder affectionately. "I'm going to see if Mrs. Johnson needs help with supper. You should invite Wyatt to join us. He looks like he could use a good meal and friendly company." Before Madeline could object, Martha was gone, leaving her to contemplate the suggestion. It would be forward of her to extend such an invitation, but hadn't they moved beyond conventional social boundaries already? Decision made, she donned her shawl and headed downstairs, emerging onto the hotel porch just as Wyatt was tying his horse to the hitching post across the street. Their eyes met, and despite his evident exhaustion, he smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his weathered face and sent a flutter of warmth through her chest. He crossed the street to join her, removing his hat as he approached. "Evening, Madeline. Everything all right?" "Yes, we're fine." "I just—" She hesitated, suddenly unsure. "You look tired. Have you eaten?" His smile deepened. "Are you worried about my welfare, Miss Porter?" "Someone should be, since you seem determined to run yourself into the ground," she retorted, finding her footing in their familiar banter. "Martha and I are having supper in the hotel dining room. Would you care to join us?" For a moment she thought he might refuse, but then he nodded. "I'd be honored. Just let me wash up a bit. Can't come to dinner looking like I've been dragged behind my horse all day." 20 minutes then." "I'll be there." True to his word, Wyatt appeared in the hotel dining room exactly 20 minutes later, freshly shaven and wearing a clean shirt, though nothing could disguise the weariness in his eyes. Martha, to Madeline's mild embarrassment, had arranged for them to have a somewhat private table in the corner, though she cleverly positioned herself as a proper chaperone while still allowing them some semblance of intimacy. The meal was simple but satisfying: roast beef, potatoes, fresh bread, and apple pie for dessert. Martha carried much of the conversation, regaling them with stories from back east that had Wyatt chuckling despite his fatigue. As the evening progressed, Madeline noticed how he gradually relaxed, the tension easing from his shoulders. "Any progress in the search?" Martha eventually asked, voicing the question Madeline had been hesitant to raise. Wyatt's expression sobered. "Some. We found evidence they've been using the old mining camp on my property, but they've moved on. Sheriff thinks they're headed for the territorial border." "Is that good news or bad?" Madeline inquired. "Both. Good that they're leaving the area, bad that they're still at large." He took a sip of coffee. "The marshal's office is sending additional men, but it could be days before they arrive." "And in the meantime, you'll keep searching," Madeline stated, a hint of reproach in her tone. His eyes met hers, understanding her concern. "It's what needs doing. Even if it means riding yourself to exhaustion, even then." His voice softened. "Some things matter more than comfort, Madeline: safety, justice, keeping promises." "What promises?" she asked, sensing something personal in his words. Wyatt hesitated, glancing at Martha, who immediately took the cue with remarkable grace. "I believe I'll see if Mrs. Johnson has any more of that delightful pie," she announced, rising. "Don't mind me, I may be some time." Once she had departed, Wyatt leaned forward, his voice low. "I knew Jerome Blackwell years ago, before he became what he is now. We rode together for a time." Madeline's eyes widened. "You were part of his gang?" "No, not as such. We were both hired guns for a cattle baron in Texas." Jerome was already walking a dark path, but I didn't see how dark until it was almost too late. His face hardened with remembered pain. "He killed a family, parents and 2 children who were homesteading on land the Baron wanted. Made it look like an Indian attack." "That's horrific," Madeline whispered. "It was. When I found out, I confronted him. We fought. I left him for dead and testified against the Baron, who hanged for ordering the killings." Wyatt's hands tightened around his coffee cup. "I thought that was the end of it until Blackwell showed up here, very much alive and looking for revenge. Against you, against anyone connected to me." His eyes held hers, intense and sincere. "That's why I need to find him, Madeline. It's not just about justice anymore, it's about protecting the people I care about." The implication hung between them, unspoken but unmistakable. Madeline reached across the table, placing her hand over his in a gesture that would have scandalized Mrs. Whittaker and her circle. "I understand," she said simply. "Just promise you won't face him alone." The corner of his mouth lifted in a half-smile. "I'll do my best." Martha's return broke the moment, though her knowing smile suggested she had observed their joined hands from a distance. The conversation turned to lighter topics, but something had shifted between Madeline and Wyatt, a deepening of understanding, a recognition of feelings that neither was quite ready to name but both acknowledged silently. As the evening drew to a close, Wyatt escorted them to their room, the perfect gentleman despite the electric awareness that seemed to surround them. "Thank you for the meal and the company," he said at their door, his eyes lingering on Madeline's face as if committing it to memory. "Best evening I've had in longer than I can recall." "Our pleasure," Martha answered for both of them. "Do join us again tomorrow if you're able." "I'd like that." He hesitated, then added quietly, "Sleep well, ladies," before turning to leave. Madeline watched him go, an unaccustomed ache in her chest. When she closed the door and turned to face Martha, her friend was regarding her with fond exasperation. "Oh, Madeline," Martha sighed. "You're in love with him, aren't you?" The bluntness of the question caught her off guard. I hardly know him." "Sometimes that doesn't matter," Martha replied sagely. "Sometimes you recognize a soul that matches yours, and time becomes irrelevant." Madeline sank onto the edge of the bed, her composure finally cracking. "It's madness, isn't it? To feel this way about a man I've known for less than a week. If it is, then half the great love stories ever written are about madness." Martha sat beside her, taking her hand. "And I've seen how he looks at you when he thinks no one is watching. Like you're the answer to a question he's been asking his whole life." Tears pricked at Madeline's eyes, not of sadness but of a confused joy and fear intertwined. "What if something happens to him, Martha? Blackwell is dangerous and Wyatt's determined to stop him, whatever the cost." "Then we pray it doesn't come to that," Martha said firmly. "And we trust that a man who has survived everything life has thrown at him so far won't be defeated now, when he finally has someone to live for." The words, meant as comfort, cast the situation into stark relief. Madeline realized with sudden clarity that the whispers that had haunted her that she'd be alone forever had lost their power. Whether it was madness or fate, her heart had recognized in Wyatt Finley a kindred spirit, a man whose strength matched her own, whose shadows complemented her light. As they prepared for bed, Madeline found herself drawn to the window once more, gazing out at the now quiet street, where a single lamp burned in the sheriff's office, a silent testimony to the vigil being kept against the dangers lurking beyond the town's borders. "Come back to me," she whispered to the night, a prayer and a command woven into one. Dawn broke with an ominous bank of dark clouds on the western horizon, promising a storm by afternoon. Madeline woke early, a sense of disquiet disturbing her sleep. Martha still slumbered peacefully, so she dressed quietly and slipped downstairs, hoping a cup of coffee might settle her nerves. The hotel's dining room was mostly empty at this hour, with only a few early risers, drummers, and cattlemen mainly nursing cups of coffee before beginning their day's business. Madeline selected a table near the window, absently stirring sugar into her coffee while watching the town come to life. She was so absorbed in her thoughts that she didn't notice Timothy Walsh, the bank manager, until he was standing beside her table. "Miss Porter," he greeted with stiff formality. "May I join you?" Surprised but too well-mannered to refuse, Madeline gestured to the chair opposite. "Mr. Walsh, you're up early." "Banking hours wait for no man," he replied humorlessly, settling his substantial frame into the chair. He studied her for a moment, his pinched features suggesting he was working up to something distasteful. "I understand you've become acquainted with Wyatt Finley." The statement, with its clear disapproval, immediately raised Madeline's hackles. "Mr. Finley has been very helpful during this difficult time, yes." Walsh's lips pursed. "I feel obligated, as a leading citizen of this community and out of respect for your late father, to warn you about associating with a man of Finley's background." "That's very thoughtful," Madeline replied, her tone cooling noticeably, "but unnecessary. Mr. Finley has been forthright about his past." "Has he?" Walsh leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Has he told you how he killed his own brother in a dispute over a woman, or how he was suspected of stage robbery in Colorado before coming here?" The accusations hit Madeline like a physical blow, but she maintained her composure. "I find it difficult to believe such tales without evidence, Mr. Walsh, and I wonder at your motivation for spreading them." Walsh's face reddened. "My motivation, Miss Porter, is the welfare of this town and its reputation. Silver Creek is growing, attracting respectable businesses and families. Men like Finley are remnants of a lawless past that we are working to leave behind." "And yet when that lawless past threatened the town's bank, it was Mr. Finley who helped stop the robbery," Madeline pointed out, "while you, if I recall correctly, were nowhere to be seen." The barb struck home. Walsh rose abruptly, his coffee untouched. "I see he's already won your loyalty." "A pity. Your father would be disappointed to see his daughter throwing herself at a man with blood on his hands." With that parting shot, he stalked away, leaving Madeline shaken despite her outward show of confidence. She was still processing the encounter when Sheriff Daniels entered the dining room, his expression grim as he scanned the occupants. When he spotted Madeline, he approached quickly. "Miss Porter, glad I found you. There's been a development. Is Miss Davis with you? She's still upstairs." "What's happened?" The sheriff glanced around, then lowered his voice. "Your farm was burned to the ground last night. Blackwell's calling card was found nailed to what's left of your barn door." The world seemed to tilt sideways. "My farm, all of it?" "I'm afraid so, madam." "The house, barn, everything." Deputy Collins rode out at first light to check on the livestock and found the place still smoking. His weathered face softened with genuine sympathy. "I'm truly sorry." Madeline sat in stunned silence, trying to absorb the loss of everything she had worked so hard to maintain. Her home, her independence, her father's legacy all reduced to ashes in a single night of malice. "Wyatt," she finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Out with a search party since before dawn. He doesn't know yet." The sheriff hesitated. "There's more. The calling card, it was a threat against you personally. That's why I came to find you. We need to move you somewhere safer until Blackwell's caught." A cold certainty settled over Madeline. "He's using me to draw out Wyatt, isn't he?" Sheriff Daniels nodded grimly. "Appears that way, which is why I've arranged for you and Miss Davis to stay at the Benson's ranch. It's 15 miles south, well defended, and not where anyone would expect to find you. When do we leave?" "As soon as you're packed. I've got a wagon waiting out back." He stood. "I'll wait while you inform Miss Davis and gather your things." Madeline moved through the next hour in a fog of shock and grief. Martha, awakened and informed of the situation, took charge with remarkable efficiency, packing their meager belongings and offering quiet support that required no response. By mid-morning, they were in a covered wagon headed south, accompanied by Deputy Collins and 2 ranchers who had volunteered as additional protection. The threatening storm had materialized, turning the sky a menacing gray-green and rendering the landscape as bleak as Madeline's thoughts. As Silver Creek disappeared behind them, she found herself wondering if she would ever see it or Wyatt again. "He'll find us," Martha said suddenly, as if reading her thoughts. "When he learns what's happened, nothing will keep him away." "That's what I'm afraid of," Madeline admitted. "Blackwell wants to use me as bait, if Wyatt comes after me." "Then he'll need to be cleverer than Blackwell expects," Martha finished firmly. "And from what you've told me about your cowboy, he's no fool." Madeline managed a weak smile, grateful for her friend's unwavering optimism even as worry gnawed at her heart. The Benson Ranch proved to be a substantial operation, with a large main house, several outbuildings, and a bunkhouse for the ranch hands. Mrs. Benson, a formidable woman in her 50s with iron-gray hair and kind eyes, welcomed them with practical efficiency. "You'll stay in the east bedroom," she informed them as she led them through the comfortable but unadorned house. "It has a connecting door to the study with a separate exit if needed. Not that it will be," she added hastily, seeing Martha's alarmed expression. "The ranch is well protected, but I believe in being prepared." "Thank you for your hospitality, Mrs. Benson," Madeline said sincerely. "I hope our presence won't bring trouble to your door." "Trouble comes whether invited or not," Mrs. Benson replied philosophically. "Better to face it together than alone. Now you must be hungry after your journey. I'll have May bring up some food." Once settled in their room with a tray of sandwiches and coffee, Martha turned to Madeline with determined cheerfulness. "Well, this is certainly a change from our accommodations at the hotel. Have you seen the size of that bed? We could fit 3 people comfortably." Despite everything, Madeline found herself smiling at her friend's irrepressible spirit. "Only you would focus on the furniture at a time like this." "What would you prefer I focus on? The fact that your farm is gone, or that a notorious outlaw has a vendetta against the man you love?" Martha's expression softened. "There will be time for grief and worry, Madeline, but right now we need to keep our spirits up and our wits sharp." "You're right, of course." Madeline moved to the window, gazing out at the rain that had finally begun to fall in earnest. "I just feel so helpless. Everything I've built, everything I've fought for gone in a single night." "Not everything," Martha corrected gently. "You still have your life, your courage, and people who care about you. The rest can be rebuilt." Madeline turned, gratitude welling in her heart for this friend who had traveled across half a continent to be with her. "What would I do without you, Martha Davis? Fortunately, you'll never have to find out." Martha grinned. "Now eat your sandwich. We need to keep up our strength for whatever comes next." What came next was 3 days of waiting, with no word from town beyond Deputy Collins's daily reports that the search for Blackwell continued without success. The rain persisted, turning roads to mud and making tracking nearly impossible. Madeline tried to make herself useful around the ranch, helping Mrs. Benson with household tasks and assisting May, the Chinese cook who had come west to work on the railroad and stayed when she married one of the Benson's ranch hands. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, as Madeline was helping to prepare dinner, the sound of approaching horses drew everyone's attention. Mrs. Benson moved to the window, a shotgun appearing in her hands with surprising speed. 3 riders, she reported. "One's the deputy, but I don't recognize the others." Madeline joined her at the window, her heart leaping when she recognized the second rider. "The tall one is Wyatt Finley," she said, unable to keep the relief from her voice. Mrs. Benson gave her a knowing look, but made no comment as she set aside the shotgun and moved to open the door. Moments later, Wyatt stood in the doorway, rain dripping from his hat and coat, his eyes searching the room until they found Madeline. The intensity of his gaze stole her breath. Without a word, he crossed the room in 3 long strides and took her hands in his, examining her as if assuring himself she was truly unharmed. "You're all right," he said hoarsely, the simple statement conveying volumes of relief. "I am," she confirmed, acutely aware of the others watching but unable to look away from his face. "But my farm, I know, I saw it." His hands tightened around hers. "I'm sorry, Madeline, I know what it meant to you." The genuine understanding in his voice threatened to unravel her hard-won composure. She blinked back tears, forcing herself to focus on practical matters. "Have you found Blackwell?" A shadow crossed Wyatt's face. "Not yet, but we will." He glanced at the third rider who had remained by the door. "This is Marshal James Harker from the Territorial Office. He's coordinating the search now." Marshal Harker, a lean, weathered man with observant eyes, nodded in greeting. "Miss Porter, I understand you've had a rough time of it." "Rest assured, we're doing everything possible to bring Blackwell to justice." "Thank you, Marshal." Madeline reluctantly withdrew her hands from Wyatt's, conscious of propriety despite the circumstances. "How long do you think we'll need to stay here?" "Hard to say," Harker replied honestly. "Blackwell's gone to ground somewhere in the foothills. With this rain, tracking's been near impossible, but it can't last forever. When it breaks, we'll find him." Mrs. Benson, ever practical, gestured toward the kitchen. "You men must be hungry and wet through." Mays made a venison stew that would bring a dead man back to life. "Get yourselves dry by the fire, and we'll eat shortly." The evening passed in a strange blend of domesticity and tension. The marshal and deputy discussed search strategies with Mr. Benson, while Martha engaged Mrs. Benson and May in conversation about the ranch's history. Madeline found herself beside Wyatt on a bench near the fire, their shoulders nearly touching, the proximity both comfort and torment. "I heard what Walsh said to you," Wyatt said suddenly, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "About my brother." Madeline's heart skipped. "How could you know that? Small towns have big ears." His eyes remained on the fire. "I wanted you to hear the truth from me, not piece together from gossip." "You don't owe me explanations," she began, but he shook his head. "I think I do." He took a deep breath. "My brother Nathan and I both fell for the same woman back in Colorado. She chose him, and I respected that, stepped aside. What I didn't know was that she was playing us against each other, feeding Nathan lies about me, trying to steal her away." His voice roughened with old pain. "One night he confronted me, drunk and armed, said he was going to kill me for betraying him. We fought. His gun went off during the struggle, killed him instantly." "It was self-defense," Madeline stated firmly. "Yes. But to a grieving family, to a town that had already decided I was the troublemaker of the two of us, it looked like murder." His shoulders slumped slightly. "I was cleared by a judge, but the whispers followed me. Eventually, I left, started over here." Madeline placed her hand over his, a gesture of acceptance and understanding. "Thank you for telling me." His eyes, when they finally met hers, held a vulnerability that tore at her heart. "Does it change how you see me?" "Yes," she answered honestly. "It makes me see your strength more clearly. To endure such loss, such injustice, and still remain a good man, that takes remarkable courage." Something shifted in his expression, a softening, a dawning hope. He turned his hand beneath hers, interlacing their fingers in a gesture more intimate than any embrace. "Madeline," whatever he had been about to say was interrupted by Marshal Harker's approach. "Finley, we should turn in. Early start tomorrow if this rain ever lets up." Wyatt nodded, though reluctance was evident in every line of his body as he released Madeline's hand. "Of course, Marshal." The moment broken, they rejoined the others, but something had changed between them, a deepening of connection, an unspoken promise of conversations yet to come. That night, As Madeline lay beside Martha in the large bed, sleep eluded her. The loss of her farm, the threat hanging over them all, the revelations Wyatt had shared, it was too much to process at once. Yet amidst the turmoil, a certainty had taken root in her heart, a recognition that whatever happened next, she would not face it alone. "He loves you, you know," Martha murmured sleepily beside her. Madeline turned her head. "How can you tell? The way he looks at you when he thinks no one's watching. Like you're water in the desert." Martha yawned. "Told you so." With those smug words, Martha drifted off to sleep, leaving Madeline to contemplate the possibility that perhaps, just perhaps, the town's whispers about her solitary future had been as wrong as their judgments of Wyatt Finley. Morning brought a break in the rain and renewed activity at the ranch. The marshal and his men prepared to depart early, planning to cover the northern foothills, where recent reports suggested Blackwell might be hiding. Wyatt, however, seemed hesitant to leave, finding reasons to delay until the others had already mounted up. Madeline found him in the barn, checking his saddle one final time, his movements slow and deliberate. "They're waiting for you," she said softly, announcing her presence. He straightened, turning to face her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "I know, I just—" He ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of uncertainty. "I don't like leaving you here. Mrs. Benson is quite capable with that shotgun," Madeline reminded him with a small smile. "And Mr. Benson has armed all the ranch hands. We're safer here than anywhere. It's not just that." He took a step closer, close enough that she could see the different shades of blue in his eyes, the tiny scar at the corner of his mouth. "Madeline, when I saw your farm burn to the ground, all I could think was that you might have been inside. That I might have lost you before I ever really had the chance to know you." The raw honesty in his voice made her breath catch. "Wyatt, let me finish," he said gently. "I know this is fast, too fast by proper standards, but life out here has taught me that tomorrow isn't guaranteed. So I need to say this now while I can." He took her hands in his calloused fingers warm against her skin. "They whisper that you'll be alone forever, but as long as I'm breathing, that will never be true. If you'll have me once this is over, once you're safe, I want to build a life with you. Whatever that looks like, wherever that might be." Joy, pure and unexpected, welled up within her. "Are you proposing, Mr. Finley?" she asked, her voice unsteady despite her attempt at lightness. A smile spread across his face, transforming it completely. "I believe I am, Miss Porter." Rather clumsily, but sincerely. "Then I accept," she said without hesitation, surprising even herself with the certainty of it. Clumsiness and all, for a breathless moment they stood frozen in mutual amazement at the path they had just committed to. Then, with a deliberate slowness that gave her every opportunity to pull away, Wyatt leaned down and kissed her, a gentle, questioning touch that deepened when she responded, her hands moving to his shoulders as his arms encircled her waist. The kiss was everything Madeline had never known to hope for, tender yet passionate, a promise and a claiming all at once. When they finally parted, both breathing unevenly, Wyatt rested his forehead against hers. "I have to go," he murmured reluctantly. "I know." She straightened his collar, a strangely domestic gesture that felt right despite its newness. "Fine, Blackwell, end this, then come back to me. Nothing could keep me away." He kissed her once more, briefly but with unmistakable intent, then mounted his horse with fluid grace. Madeline stood in the barn doorway, watching as he rode to join the marshal and deputy. Just before they disappeared from view, Wyatt turned in his saddle, raising his hand in farewell, not goodbye, but a promise to return. The day passed in a strange limbo of ordinary tasks and extraordinary anticipation. Madeline helped with chores around the ranch, grateful for the physical activity that kept her mind from dwelling too much on potential dangers. Martha, observant as ever, said little about the change in Madeline's demeanor, but occasionally caught her eye with a knowing smile that suggested she had guessed the outcome of the barn conversation. By late afternoon, clouds were gathering again on the horizon, promising more rain by nightfall. Mr. Benson and several ranch hands rode out to check on a distant herd, leaving the women and 2 younger hands to watch over the main house. As darkness fell, bringing with it the promised rain, Madeline found herself growing increasingly restless, a sense of foreboding settling over her that she couldn't explain. "You're wearing a path in the floor," Martha observed as Madeline paced the length of their bedroom for the dozenth time. "He'll be fine, they all will." "I know," Madeline replied automatically, though the knot in her stomach suggested otherwise. "It's just a sudden commotion from downstairs interrupted her." Raised voices, the sound of something breaking, then a woman's scream. Maze, Madeline thought with horror. Without hesitation, she moved to the door, but Martha caught her arm. "Wait, we don't know what's happening." Before Madeline could respond, heavy footsteps pounded up the stairs, followed by a sharp knock at their door. "Miss Porter, Miss Davis, it's Mrs. Benson, please open up." Madeline complied, revealing Mrs. Benson, pale but composed, her shotgun held ready at her side. "We have trouble," she said without preamble. "3 men just rode in Blackwell and 2 others. They've got my husband and the hands who went with him. They're demanding you come down, Miss Porter." Cold fear washed over Madeline. "What do they want with me?" "Bait, I expect," Mrs. Benson replied grimly. "For Finley." "I have to go down there," Madeline decided immediately. "If Mr. Benson's life is at stake." "Absolutely not," Martha interjected fiercely. "That's exactly what they want." Mrs. Benson nodded. "Your friend is right, which is why we're leaving now through the study window. There's a small spring house about a 1/4 mile east. Hide there while I create a distraction." "I won't leave you to face them alone," Madeline protested. "You will if you want to save lives rather than lose them," Mrs. Benson countered firmly. "I have no intention of dying today, but I've lived long enough not to fear death if it comes. You 2 have a lot more living to do." She pressed a small revolver into Madeline's hands. "Take this. 5 shots. Use them wisely if you must." The gravity of the situation left no room for further argument. Quickly gathering their cloaks, Madeline and Martha followed Mrs. Benson through the connecting door to the study and out the window to the rain-soaked ground below. The night was pitch black, the heavy clouds obscuring moon and stars, which provided cover but also made navigation treacherous. "East is that way," Mrs. Benson whispered, pointing. "Stay low, move quickly. God be with you both." With that, she disappeared back into the house, leaving Madeline and Martha alone in the stormy darkness. "Come on," Madeline urged, grasping Martha's hand. "We need to move." They picked their way across the muddy yard, using outbuildings for cover when possible, the sound of the rain masking their movements. They had almost reached the edge of the clearing when a shout went up from the house, followed by the unmistakable crack of gunfire. Despite her instinct to turn back, Madeline pressed forward, pulling Martha with her into the relative shelter of the trees. The spring house, when they finally found it, was little more than a stone hut built over a natural spring, with a low door and no windows. Inside, it was pitch dark and smelled of damp earth and minerals. They huddled together against the far wall, listening to the rain pounding on the simple wooden roof and the distant sounds of commotion from the ranch. "What do we do now?" Martha whispered, her voice remarkably steady despite her evident fear. "Wait," Madeline replied, checking that the revolver was ready if needed. "And pray that Wyatt and the marshal return soon." Time stretched interminably in the darkness. Minutes felt like hours as they strained to hear any approach over the persistent drumming of the rain. Madeline found herself mentally rehearsing what she would do if Blackwell discovered their hiding place, how many shots she could fire, whether she could create enough of a distraction for Martha to escape. A sudden sound outside, not the rain, but the deliberate movement of someone approaching, froze them both in place. Madeline raised the revolver, aiming at the door, her heart hammering so loudly she was sure it would give them away. The door creaked open slowly, revealing a dark silhouette against the marginally lighter night beyond. For one terrifying moment, Madeline almost squeezed the trigger before a familiar voice stopped her. "Madeline, Martha, are you in here?" "Wyatt." Madeline nearly sobbed with relief as he stepped inside, water streaming from his coat and hat. Without thinking, she launched herself into his arms, the revolver safely pointed away. He held her tightly for a brief moment before gently setting her back. "Are you both all right, Mrs. Benson told me where to find you." "We're unharmed," Martha confirmed, "but Blackwell, he has Mr. Benson and some of the hands, and Mrs. Benson was still in the house when we left. The marshal and his men are handling it," Wyatt assured them. "Blackwell walked into a trap. He thought we'd all ridden north, but we circled back when one of the hands spotted his gang approaching from the south." "Is it over?" Madeline asked, hardly daring to hope. "Almost." Wyatt's expression was grim but satisfied. "2 of Blackwell's men are dead. He's cornered in the barn with one hostage, one of the younger hands. Marshall's negotiating now." Relief washed over Madeline, quickly followed by concern. "We should go back. If there's a hostage situation, no," Wyatt cut her off firmly. "I promised the marshal I'd get you both to safety, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. There's a wagon waiting down the road with 2 armed men. They'll take you to Silver Creek while we finish this." "And you?" Madeline couldn't keep the fear from her voice. Wyatt's expression softened. "I'll join you as soon as I can. But I need to see this through, Madeline. I need to know it's truly over." Understanding, though reluctant, she nodded. "Be careful. Always." He kissed her briefly but fervently, then turned to Martha. "Miss Davis, I'm counting on you to keep her from doing anything reckless." Martha smiled despite the tension. "I'll do my best, Mr. Finley, though history suggests I'm fighting a losing battle." With one last look at Madeline, a look that conveyed everything words could not, Wyatt led them out into the rain, moving swiftly but carefully through the woods, until they reached the road where, as promised, a covered wagon waited with 2 armed men on the box. The parting was brief by necessity, with Wyatt helping them into the wagon before disappearing back into the stormy night, heading toward the ranch and whatever final confrontation awaited with Jerome Blackwell. As the wagon lurched into motion, Madeline found herself staring back at where they had come from, straining for any sight or sound that might indicate what was happening. "He'll be fine," Martha assured her, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her own uncertainty. "He has too much to live for now." Madeline clutched her friend's hand, drawing comfort from the simple human connection as the wagon carried them away from danger and toward an uncertain future. Whatever happened next, she knew with bone-deep certainty that her life had changed irrevocably, not just because of the loss of her farm, but because of the man who had promised she would never be alone again. The journey to Silver Creek was slow and tense, the muddy roads making progress difficult even for the sturdy wagon. By the time they reached town, dawn was breaking, painting the rain-washed streets in pale golden light. Deputy Wilson, left behind to maintain order in the sheriff's absence, met them at the edge of town. "Ladies," he greeted with evident relief. "Glad to see you both safe. We've prepared rooms for you at the hotel." "Any word from the ranch?" Madeline asked immediately. The deputy shook his head. Not yet. But the telegraph line to the next town is down from the storm, so that's not surprising. I'm sure we'll hear something soon. The hotel was quiet at this early hour, with only the desk clerk drowsily on duty. He provided keys to their rooms with minimal conversation, clearly having been informed of their situation in advance. Once in their adjoining rooms, Madeline and Martha took turns bathing and changing into clean clothes provided by the hotel owner's wife, simple dresses that didn't fit perfectly but were blissfully dry and clean. "What do we do now?" Martha asked as they shared a light breakfast sent up from the kitchen. "Wait," Madeline replied, the word becoming a familiar refrain, "and try not to imagine the worst." The waiting stretched through the morning and into the afternoon, each hour that passed without news increasing Madeline's anxiety. She tried to distract herself by writing a detailed inventory of what she would need to rebuild her farm, assuming she still had land to rebuild on, but found herself staring at the same blank page hour after hour, her mind too full of worry to focus. As afternoon faded toward evening, a commotion in the street drew her to the window. A group of riders was approaching from the south, dirty, tired men on equally exhausted horses. Her heart leapt as she recognized Wyatt among them, apparently uninjured though visibly weary. Without a word to Martha, she raced downstairs and out onto the hotel porch, propriety forgotten in her relief. Wyatt spotted her immediately, his tired face lighting with a smile that made her heart turn over. He dismounted somewhat stiffly and approached, removing his hat as he climbed the steps to join her. "You're all right," she said, resisting the urge to throw herself into his arms in full view of the town. "I am." His eyes never left her face. "And it's over. Blackwell's dead." The finality of the statement hit her with unexpected force. Dead, not captured. He wouldn't surrender. Tried to use his hostage as a shield to escape. Marshall had no choice. Wyatt's expression showed no satisfaction, only a somber acceptance. "It's better this way. There won't be a trial, no more waiting and wondering if he'll escape justice again." Madeline nodded, understanding the complex emotions behind his words. "And the others? Mrs. Benson, her husband, all safe. A few injuries, nothing serious." He took a step closer, lowering his voice for her ears alone. "I meant what I said yesterday, Madeline. Every word. But I'll understand if you need time, especially now with your farm gone and so much uncertainty." "I meant what I said too," she interrupted firmly. "The farm was land and timber, things that can be rebuilt. What matters is that we're both here, both safe." She smiled up at him, no longer caring who might be watching. "And neither of us is alone anymore." The look that crossed his face, wonder mixed with joy and a hunger that had nothing to do with food, made her breath catch. Before either could speak again, however, Martha appeared at the door, her expression a mixture of relief and mischief. "Mr. Finley. How delightful to see you unperforated by bullets. I assume by my friend's radiant expression that you've vanquished the villains and all is well." Wyatt chuckled, the sound warming Madeline from within. "That's one way of putting it, Miss Davis. Though I think all is well might be premature, given the circumstances." "Nonsense," Martha declared breezily. "You're both alive, the bad guys are defeated, and unless I miss my guess, there's a wedding in the offing. I'd say that qualifies as all is well by any reasonable standard." Madeline flushed. "Martha, what, am I wrong?" Martha challenged, eyebrows raised innocently. Wyatt's smile deepened as he looked from Martha to Madeline. "No, you're not wrong, though I'd hoped for a slightly more private discussion of the details." "Oh, well, don't let me interrupt." Martha made a show of retreating back into the hotel. "I suddenly remember I have an urgent thing to attend to upstairs for at least an hour." As the door closed behind her, Madeline couldn't help laughing despite her embarrassment. "I apologize for my friend. She's somewhat lacking in subtlety." "But not in loyalty," Wyatt observed. "You're fortunate to have her." "I am," Madeline agreed. Then, gathering her courage, she added, "just as I'm fortunate to have you." Wyatt's expression softened. "I'm the fortunate one. When I think how close I came to losing you before I even had the chance to tell you how I felt." He shook his head. "I don't intend to waste any more time, Madeline. Life's too uncertain." "What are you saying?" she asked, though her heart already knew the answer. "I'm saying I love you. I'm saying I want to marry you as soon as it can be arranged if you'll have me. I'm saying I want us to build something together, a home, a future, a life." He took her hands in his. "My ranch is yours if you want it, or we can start fresh somewhere else entirely. I just know I want to be where you are." Joy, pure and overwhelming, bubbled up within her. "I love you too, Wyatt, and yes, yes to all of it." This time, neither of them cared about potential observers as he pulled her into his arms and kissed her. A kiss that sealed promises and began a future neither had dared imagine just days before. The next 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity and adjustment. Madeline's farm, while severely damaged, was not a total loss. The land itself remained, and the insurance her father had wisely purchased would provide enough to begin rebuilding. Wyatt's ranch, significantly larger and more established, offered a ready home in the meantime, though they agreed that any major decisions about their future would wait until after they were married. The town's reaction to their engagement was mixed, as expected. Mrs. Whitaker and her circle were scandalized by both the speed of the relationship and Wyatt's somewhat colorful past. But others, particularly those who had witnessed his courage during the Blackwell ordeal, were more supportive. Sheriff Daniels, in particular, surprised everyone by offering to stand as Wyatt's best man at the ceremony. "Never thought I'd see the day," he confided to Madeline after making the offer. "Finley was always a loner, kept to himself, but you've changed him, Miss Porter. For the better, I'd say." The Bensons, once recovered from their ordeal, insisted on hosting the wedding at their ranch, a gesture of friendship and solidarity that touched both Madeline and Wyatt deeply. Mrs. Benson and Martha threw themselves into planning with enthusiasm, transforming the simple ceremony into a community celebration that symbolized not just the union of two people, but the triumph of hope over fear, connection over isolation. On the morning of the wedding, exactly 3 weeks after Blackwell's death, Madeline stood in the Bensons' guest room while Martha helped her dress in a gown that had been a gift from several of the town's women. Not Mrs. Whitaker's circle, but the practical wives of shopkeepers and ranchers who had, over the past weeks, revealed themselves as true friends. "You look beautiful," Martha said sincerely, adjusting the simple veil that crowned Madeline's auburn hair. "Wyatt won't know what hit him." "I still can't believe this is happening," Madeline confessed, a mixture of joy and wonder in her voice. "A month ago I was alone, struggling to maintain my farm, listening to whispers that I'd always be solitary. Now you're about to marry a handsome cowboy who adores you, with a whole community gathered to celebrate." Martha squeezed her hands. "It's like something from a novel." "Better," Madeline decided, "because it's real." A knock at the door announced Mrs. Benson, resplendent in her Sunday best. "It's time, dear. Everyone's assembled." The ceremony itself was beautifully simple, held under a canopy of autumn leaves in the Bensons' orchard. Madeline would remember it later in flashes of perfect clarity. The look on Wyatt's face when he first saw her walking toward him, the strength of his hands as they held hers during their vows, the unexpected tears in Sheriff Daniels's eyes as he handed over the rings. Martha's beaming smile as she stood witness to her friend's happiness. "I, Wyatt, take thee, Madeline, to be my lawfully wedded wife." His deep voice resonated with sincerity as he spoke the traditional words. "To have and to hold from this day forward for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." When it came her turn, Madeline's voice was steady, her heart full. "I, Madeline, take thee, Wyatt, to be my lawfully wedded husband. To have and to hold from this day forward for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." Reverend Thomas, who had overcome his initial reservations about the match, pronounced them husband and wife with genuine warmth. "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." Wyatt's kiss was gentle but promising, appropriate for the public setting yet hinting at more private celebrations to come. As they turned to face their guests, now officially Mr. and Mrs. Finley, the gathered crowd erupted in cheers and applause, a sound that washed away the last echoes of those earlier, darker whispers. The celebration that followed was joyous and relaxed, with food contributed by many hands and music provided by a local fiddler and his sons. Madeline found herself passed from dance partner to dance partner. Mr. Benson, Sheriff Daniels, even young Deputy Collins, though she always returned to Wyatt's arms as if drawn by an invisible thread. During a brief moment alone, as they caught their breath between dances, Wyatt leaned down to whisper in her ear, "Happy, Mrs. Finley." "Happier than I knew was possible," she replied truthfully, reaching up to touch his cheek. "And you?" His smile, rare and beautiful, was answer enough, but he added words for good measure. "I never thought I'd find this peace, belonging, love. You've given me all three." "We've given them to each other," she corrected gently. As the celebration continued around them, Madeline caught sight of Martha deep, in conversation with a young rancher from a neighboring property. Her friend's animated expression suggesting the spark of mutual interest. The sight filled her with quiet joy. Martha deserved happiness as much as anyone, and the West, for all its harshness, had a way of creating unexpected connections. When darkness fell, lanterns were lit, casting a warm glow over the gathering that continued well into the night. Eventually, though, the guests began to depart, with many stopping to offer final congratulations and good wishes. Mrs. Whittaker, in a gesture of unexpected graciousness, presented them with a fine linen tablecloth. "Every home needs beauty as well as practicality," she said with dignity. "I wish you both happiness." As the last guests departed, Martha embraced Madeline fiercely. "I'll come visit you tomorrow before I leave," she promised. With her father's health declining, Martha needed to return east, though she had extracted a promise from Madeline to write regularly. "I'll hold you to that," Madeline replied, blinking back tears. "Thank you for everything, Martha, for coming when I needed you most, for standing by me through all of this." "What are friends for?" Martha smiled, then turned to Wyatt with unexpected seriousness. "Take care of her, Mr. Finley. She's the best person I know." "I will," he promised solemnly. "And it's Wyatt, remember, your family now." Martha's smile brightened. "Family, I like the sound of that." With final hugs and promises to visit again soon, Martha departed with the Bensons, leaving the newlyweds to begin the journey to what would now be their shared home. The night was clear, the stars brilliant overhead as they traveled the familiar road to Wyatt's ranch, their ranch now. "I had them prepare the house," Wyatt told her as they approached, a touch of nervousness in his voice that she found endearing. "I hope you'll be comfortable." "I'm sure I will be," she assured him, touched by his consideration. The ranch house, when they arrived, was lit with a warm welcome, lamps glowing in the windows. Inside, Madeline discovered thoughtful touches that must have taken considerable effort: fresh flowers in vases, new curtains at the windows, a quilt she recognized from her own farmhouse, rescued from the fire and carefully cleaned. "How did you manage all this?" she asked, deeply moved. "I had help," Wyatt admitted. "Mrs. Benson and some of the other women, they wanted you to feel at home." Madeline turned to him, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "Home isn't a place, Wyatt, it's where you are." The look he gave her, then tender, passionate, full of promise, made her breath catch. Without another word, he swept her into his arms and carried her to what was now their bedroom, where the journey they had begun amidst danger and uncertainty transformed into one of discovery and joy. In the quiet hours before dawn, as they lay entwined in peaceful contentment, Madeline reflected on the strange and wonderful path that had brought her to this moment. The whispers that had once haunted her, that she'd be alone forever, now seemed like echoes from another life, one that had led her, through hardship and loss, to a love deeper than she had ever imagined possible. Beside her, Wyatt stirred, his arm tightening around her waist as if, even in sleep, he couldn't bear to let her go. "Madeline," he murmured, his voice husky with slumber. "I'm here," she assured him, pressing a kiss to his shoulder. "I'll always be here." His eyes opened, finding hers in the pre-dawn light. "Promise." "With all my heart," she whispered. "Not while you're breathing will I ever be alone again." His smile, slow and sweet, was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. "Nor I," he promised in return. "Nor I." As the first light of their first day as husband and wife began to filter through the curtains, Madeline Porter Finley closed her eyes in perfect contentment, secure in the knowledge that whatever challenges life might still hold, they would face them together, two souls who had found in each other not just love, but home.